Hey everyone, Aaron here. Welcome back to another anime review. Today we look at the show known as 100. Now, here's the thing, folks, and I'm going to be honest with you. I was going to originally do episodic reviews for 100 when I first heard about it being released. And because it's not a genre I don't mind too much. You know, it's a harem, mecha / action series. And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty kind of cool. You know, they're series that I kind of lose, I want to say, I don't really take super seriously. I don't lose the sense of like, oh, you know, I hate this show right away. No, because it's of the genre. More so, I take them with a grain of salt because usually they can't be cool. They can be funny sometimes. They could have, you know, humorous things about them in general. And they could sometimes be very good action sequences. I mean, like Infinite Stratos, which I think 100 is highly based off of, because Infinite Stratos and 100 almost have similar beginnings to a T. Like, even more so than Rakudai and the Asterix War. This show actually, I think, almost copied Infinite Stratos almost like a dozen times with many characters and many character concepts. And I'm not gonna get into that. Oh, you know, it's like just a copy and paste type thing. But I will say that they are very similar. Those shows entirely, really are similar. But I was going to do an episodic review. I canceled it because, you know, I watched the show and I've been following the show highly. This is going to be, I don't want to say an episode 12 review of the whole thing. I'm actually going to just have a whole review of the whole series instead. And, you know, I put it out because the last episode came out today. It came out like maybe 20 minutes ago. So I figured, you know what, I'll just review the whole series and hopefully that is what people watch. But 100 is not very good. I'm going to say that right off the bat. It is something that, the reason why I ended up not doing episodic reviews for it, because honestly, I didn't want to rant and rave every review for every episode, because there's a lot of issues with 100, and I'm going to get into them. Let's first talk of the synopsis like usual, and then we'll get into what's the problems and what maybe the few good redeemable factors of the show are. So, the main story has Kisaragi Hayato, who's actually a wannabe trainee slayer, who slayers are people that are actually able to use a device called 100, which when enabled actually lets them activate either weapons or armaments or stuff like that they use to fight creatures that are attacking the world, essentially. Now, Kisaragi Hayato is going to a place called Little Garden, which is a actual like last home front to protect against these monsters and, you know, can kind of protect any societies that are being rampaged and ravaged by them. And he meets along the way other slayers who will help him on his journey to destroy all these monsters. He meets an old friend who is supposed to be a dude, according to, you know, the show right away, but you can tell it's clearly a girl. But her name is Emile, and Amelia actually is what it ends up being. And Amelia is actually like him, who's actually infected with the creatures in DNA cells that lets them use inherent latent abilities to actually activate and get stronger, which actually is kind of cool when it actually happens on screen. But I'm going to go into more detail on why there's issues with that later in the actual review. Now, the show follows heavily this kind of standard tropes and genres of harem shows and action shows that are like both fused together. You know, there are a lot of monster fighting, then there's a lot of, you know, comedy harem-based stuff. You know, Kisaragi Hayato has like 3 girls that always constantly are trying to vie for his affection. But what I liked about the show, and one of the redeemable factors of it, is that the harem elements are not always shoved in your face. A lot of times it's used in a very playful manner to me, just comedy, and then the show really does focus on more of the action stuff. The problem with the show, though, overall, though, is that the action and the storytelling aren't very good. They're very cliched, and they have felt they've been done there and been there, done that before mentality. Now, you know, I don't want to say that all harems are like that, because there's plenty of harem stories that are actually pretty unique and interesting and clever, but 100 really kind of just takes every format they can from the actual shows that they look like they're trying to take from. You know, you have a lot of stuff that you've seen before in harems. You have the, you know, again, the multiple girls that are trying to vie for his affection, really. You have him kind of being a dumb main protagonist. You have the, again, the Infinite Stratos thing with a guy who's actually a girl. You know, a lot of issues with it. You know, what works for the show is that, though, when it's not always in your face, it can be very humorous to see some of the action sequences, and very humorous. Oh, no, actually, I don't want to say action sequences, more so the comedy stuff could be humorous. The action sequences are pretty cool when they work, but overall, you don't really feel like this is going to be one of those shows that you're going to remember down the line. It's actually one of those shows that you kind of just forget about immediately, right after it's probably done for a couple weeks. And honestly, that's my biggest complaint about it, is that everything about the show is very ho-hum. You know, you don't really have great animation. You don't have very good voice acting. I mean, that's not bad, but it's not that great either. The music's forgettable. The opening and closing are forgettable. The story is forgettable. And I think the story is poorly executed when it actually goes into play. There are too often that you have characters that seem like they're very important and then kind of get pushed to the side once their arc is done. You have elements that are never fully explained. You have one of those kind of main protagonists who, again, is an idiot, but, you know, is really overpowered and stuff like that. It's just, there's a lot of issues with 100, and honestly, it's just not a great series overall. Now, the last episode was pretty good. I actually enjoyed the last episode because it did have a little bit of stuff that was pretty interesting, but it's one of those shows that you know is going to be a second season even possible. That's a big meh, you know. I don't know if that's even going to happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, you know, but I really don't per se hold my breath that a second season will happen. And if a second season does happen, hey, I'll be watching it, you know, just because I've seen the first one at this point. But honestly, it's just a show that I don't really care about. Like, I'm not going to be talking about this weeks later with my friends and be like, oh yeah, 100, that was a great show. I'm not going to talk about this after this. I'm going to be like, yeah, oh, yeah, I vaguely remember 100. Yeah, I had some guy who's dressed as a girl or backwards, whatever. Honestly, you know, that's the reason why I didn't do episode reviews for this, because I knew I was going to rant and rave about the show, and I didn't want to do that, and I don't want you guys to hear me rant and rave about a show either, because, like I always say, you know, it takes a lot of work to make anime in general, and there are times where it's just hit or miss. That's the bottom line. It's like any piece of work or any form of media or medium, excuse me. You could have your good days, you could have your bad days. In 100, I almost call it Fitzgerald's because that is what so highly reminds me of. 100 really does hit those bad notes more than anything else. That's why, give it everything about the show. If I had to review it A through F, I have to give it a D. I'll give it a D+, I'll be generous. It doesn't fail. It's going to have some stuff that, you know, if you really like the harem genre, I will see you enjoying the show for what it is. If you really are not a huge fan of the harem genre, you're going to probably hate this. And if you're trying to get into, like, I want to say the harem genre, this is probably one of the worst ways to get into it. But there are some redeemable factors. Like I said, the action's good. I want to say the comedy can be done very, very well sometimes. And the animation, despite it being not that great, does work sometimes during the action sequences especially. But overall, everything else about the show kind of falls flat, and that's why, even though it's almost a failure rate, it's not there. It's still passing. It still has some, you know, macronyms of actual being decent. Now, I will say episode 12, though, again, had, I think, the best scene in that we have our main protagonist actually being a man for once. And I'm going to show the image right now, so this is spoiler territory if you haven't seen the show, but he actually, you know, gets with the main girl, like the actual girl that's been dressed as a guy this whole time. He actually kisses her back at one point, and you know what, I'm like, okay, that's actually, hey, a main character that takes initiative. I like it. Because Infinite Stratos did not have that. Infinite Stratos actually had the main character for that actually not do anything with the girl at the end, which, you know, pissed me off highly because they got so close to it and they just went, nah, let's not do it. But I liked how it ended overall. Anyways, guys and girls, that's it for today's review. I hope you liked it. As always, you know, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, share the video, you know, the whole nine. Until our paths cross again, next review, I'll talk to you all later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.